And good evening to you folks. How are you on this fine Wednesday? Hello, Damien X247. It's good to see you, buddy. Apologies to the folks over on Facebook. There's a little bit of a hiccup getting connected, so you didn't quite get to see all those credits. But hey, don't worry. They're playing before every episode from now on. How are you guys? Doomsword Deathmaster. You don't get ominous handle. Doomsword Deathmaster. What's up? You are my friend. Mobius. Lord Corion. Good to see you all. Good to see everybody here this evening. YouTube's playing its games. But anyway. How the heck are you guys? I hope you're doing well. I am having an absolutely wonderful evening. Just hanging out with you guys. We're going to continue deep diving into original Dungeons and Dragons. That's going to be a lot of fun. Hello, Telly. Good to see you. So, lots of interesting things to talk about tonight. Yesterday was my daughter's birthday, my older daughter's birthday, and I took her down to Gods and Monsters. Those are my friends, Todd and Anna. Gods and Monsters. If you're in the Orlando area, you're in Central Florida, you're bringing the family to a visit to the mouse, don't miss out. Go to Gods and Monsters over on International Drive. Vault 5421. You have to see it, okay? It's a place for... Vault 5421 is their Fallout-themed, Wasteland-themed bar in the back. It's a fun place for the parents to hang out while the kids buy the comic books and the role-playing games. But they have stuff for everybody. They got comics, role-playing games, science fiction stuff, all that cool jazz. But anyway, I was down there, and my buddy Todd, wouldn't you know it, Todd knows that when there is something with Gary Gygax on the cover, something old school, to seize upon it. And at least see if I wanted it. And so Todd picked up, see if I can get this over here. Todd picked up a copy of Knight Errant, a Gord the Rogue book. That is one of the Nippy imprints from back in the day. Gary on the back cover. I'll give that a quick read for you guys. The blurb on the back. Blurb. I love that word. Blurb. In a world fraught with sorcery and skullduggery, every day can bring new experience. Some of them humorous, some utterly horrifying. So it is with Gord, a young adventurer who not only attracts excitement, but thrives on it. Knight Errant is a collection of 9 short stories featuring the character for whom the Gord the Rogue book series is named, showing some sides of him that have not been revealed before. Readers who savor fast-moving fantasy adventures will enjoy seeing how Gord gets himself into, and most of the time out of, one predicament after another. It's a little hard for me to read. This is black text on red, and I don't have any readers on, so sorry for stumbling over there. But yes, I picked up this nice crispy copy of Knight Errant. Thank you very much, Todd. And speaking of crispy things that I picked up, I'm going to bother showing this. But, or not showing it on the little webcam there. But I got myself a nice cold Sprecher's. I'm trying to kick the habit of soda, so I decided to giving my taste buds a good going away party rather than, a Sprite or a Mountain Dew like that would be. Can you get that? There we go. Would be better. So this is a craft soda. This is grape flavor, honey, fresh water, all that natural kind of stuff. Sprecher's great, but this is delicious. Like, if I could get these in the supermarket, I would weigh 300 pounds and have no teeth because I would drink it all the time. But anyway, I love Spreckers. This is delicious stuff. You should absolutely try this if you get the chance. And Spreckers, if you're looking for somebody to do an endorsement, how about the official drink of the Delver's Dungeon? Just saying, just think about it. If any of you folks happen to catch it, just food for thought. That hits the spot. That is good stuff. Mobius says, a bit of coin there nowadays. Are you talking about the Gord the Rogue books? I think, I could be wrong, but I think actually you can get these Troll Lord Games publish them now. I'm not 100% sure. So don't quote me on that, just on the off chance that I might be wrong. So anyway, it's good to see you all there in the chat. It's wonderful. That is tasty. But anyhow, if you folks recall, the last time we played original Dungeons and Dragons live on the channel, well, no, I shouldn't say that, because last night we played Dungeons and Dragons live on the channel, but it was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Rob Conley, good to see you. How the heck are you, my friend? The last time we played original Dungeons and Dragons is part of our Let's Play and Read Original Dungeons and Dragons series that we're doing. Xylarthen the Second had ventured by himself into the dungeons of Castle Greyhawk, fought 3 skeletons and 3 orcs, and escaped by the skin of his teeth with a mere 12 copper pieces to his name. Now, I'm not a dungeon master who's much for hand-waving things, although you can. Sometimes if a dice roll or a table lookup or a rules consultation or a module perusal is going to slow down your game, it's best to press on. It is best just to take the tack of, you know what, let's just move on. I have a good flow going right now. I have a good flow going, and I'm not going to break it up by just bringing the game to a crashing halt to read stuff ahead. I do like the digital Darlene Greyhawk map. It's lovely. But I do like to go by the book when I can. However, in our example, in talking about getting Xylarthen the Second into Castle Greyhawk, we just kind of hand-waved the overland travel to get there. But original Dungeons and Dragons actually covers overland travel. You see, there's basically 2 books in original Dungeons and Dragons. I know there's 3 volumes, but there's 2 books, really. There's Men in Magic, which is essentially the player's handbook, although it does feature combat tables in it. And then there's Monsters and Treasure and the Underworld and Wilderness Adventures. So you could say that Men in Magic is basically the player's handbook, but the other 2 comprise the Dungeon Master's Guide for original Dungeons and Dragons, at least the OD&D box set as it was published. So to really get into the meat of a long-term OD&D campaign that is not just a quick jaunt to the dungeons and then back out, we need to consult the Underworld and Wilderness Adventures and find out about Xylarthen's travels, Xylarthen the Second's travels to and fro in the world of Greyhawk. Now, If you recall, when we first started looking at the OD&D box set, we talked about how the game essentially says you need a copy of Chainmail and you need a copy of Avalon Hill's as outdoor. Hang on a second. I'm having a moment. Let me see here. It is the Avalon Hill game, and I can't believe I'm... Let's see. Outdoor Survival. Gosh, I don't know why. I kept wanting to say Outdoor Adventure, but it's Outdoor Survival. Outdoor Survival, the game, is not what you're after in getting Outdoor Survival, although it can be a fine game unto itself. It is the outdoor map board that we need. You see, when Gary needed a campaign map initially to put the Kingdom of Greyhawk in, that was what he grabbed. He grabbed a copy of Outdoor Survival and said, okay, I think sinkholes were castles and lakes were cities, so on, and each was in a hex on the map. And so traveling around the Outdoor Survival map, and he expanded the size of the hex from, I think there are 2 or 3 miles in the board game Outdoor Survival. He said, okay, they're 30 miles across, and then that's where various locales in Greyhawk were located, the original map being right there. Yeah, Lord Corion, you and I were we were on the same wavelength that we thought it was Outdoor Adventures. It's Outdoor Survival. But anyway, and thank you to those in the audience who were yelling, survival, at your computers or your phones. I hope it was at your computers. I hope you weren't yelling at all, because if it was at your phones, maybe people are like, you trying to get Siri to play Eye of the Tiger? I don't. But let's dive in. Let's look at the Underworld and Wilderness Adventures. Let's take a crack at it and see what exactly Xylarthen might encounter. So I'm gonna zip me up over here. A seamless transition. The technical excellence of this show will never be surpassed. And there we go. I got to bring that over a little bit more. There we go. That's good enough. So, the Underworld and Wilderness Adventure, and we have this hippogriff here by Keenan Powell. We like it. Dragon there also. 773. What were you doing in July of 1973? I was probably playing with toy cars. Weebles. Fisher-Price Little People. A Hydra. The Underworld. So let's take a look at the Underworld. Before it is possible to conduct a campaign of adventures in the mazy dungeons, it is necessary for the referee to sit down with pencil in hand and draw these labyrinths on graph paper. Unquestionably, this will require a great deal of time and effort and imagination. The dungeons should look something like the example given below, with numerous levels which sprawl in all directions, not necessarily stacked neatly above each other in a straight line. Which is something I really prefer doing, because players have this expectation that if they just drill down through level 1, that they'll drop neatly into the exact grid coordinates in level 2. Don't let them believe that. Let them believe that Don't let them do that. So, now interesting about this sample cross-section of levels. Now, Gary was always very coy about what he put in original D&D. My buddy Paul was convinced that the Monsters and Treasures set, the Encounters in the Monsters and Treasures set, or was it Dungeon Geomorphs? No, it was Monsters and Treasures, were from Gary's Greyhawk campaign, and I had to break Paul's heart. I went to Gary and I was like, are these from your home Greyhawk campaign? And he said, no, I just made them up for the set. So, sorry. So, these may or may not be Castle Greyhawk levels here. I would think not. So, here we have a sample dungeon. And let me tell you something. Dungeon Masters, whether you're playing OD&D, AD&D, 2nd edition, whatever you're doing, don't be afraid to steal maps, all right? I have always said the worst adventure modules in the world still probably at least have good maps in them. Like, I don't give a fig about the Dragonlance series. I know. Some people love it. It was hugely popular. But the maps in the Dragonlance section, those isometric maps, are lovely, and I can't detract. So I will use them, but in just completely different stuff. So a sample cross section of levels, and I think the squiggly dealy bops there on each level are probably supposed to be stairs. But then you have slides and chutes, and straight shafts for elevators, and so on and etc. Yes, stairs, slanting passage, chute, bang. And lost Acrobat for a second. I have 2 monitors and I'm still losing stuff. It'd be like David Bowie in The Man Who Fell to Earth, just this giant wall of TVs in front of me. So there are maps, but there's no sense of scale with this. But this is the first published TSR dungeon in terms of map, right here. In beginning a dungeon, it is advisable to construct at least 3 levels at once, noting where stairs, trapdoors, and chimneys and slanting passages come out on lower levels, as well as the mouths of chutes and teleportation terminals. In doing the lowest level of such a set, it is also necessary to leave space for the various methods of egress to still lower levels. A good dungeon will have no less than 12 levels down. Gary wants you to mega dungeon, guys. He wants you to mega dungeon. With offshoot levels in addition and new levels under construction so that the players will never grow tired of it. The dungeon as a living, expanding world. You never come up to the blank wall that you cannot go around and find something to go down. Isn't that neat? There is no real limit to the number of levels, nor is there any restriction on their size other than the size of graph paper available. I wish I had it to hand, but I have an easel-sized pad of graph paper. I love it. And it's quadrille. So I could make gargantuan levels on that. Mega Dungeons are the OG. You're darn right they are. Lord Corion, you're darn right they are. Greyhawk Castle, for example, has over 12 levels in succession downward, more than that number branching from these, and not less than 2 new levels under construction at any given time. These levels contain such things as a museum from another age, an underground lake, a series of caverns filled with giant fungi, and a bowling alley for 20-foot-high giants, an arena of evil crypts, and so on. How tantalizing. How absolutely tantalizing that is. We never got to see a published Castle Greyhawk, but oh my gosh, it's right at our fingertips. If only there was a little more, right, guys? And we have the second ever published Dungeons and Dragons map here. Now note, there's no scale to this, and Gary did say put this on graph paper. So if you wanted to translate this to graph paper, you would, I would recommend print it out the size that, assuming the corridors are 1/4 inch wide, and go from there to get the size of this. But here we have a sample level. And again, we don't know if this is part of Castle Greyhawk or not. But we have a nice key. Underfloor passage, steps up, steps down, solid rock, a false door, doors, pit traps, secret doors, secret door with 2 possible ways to open. How many of you guys have done that? Trapdoor up or trapdoor down. And numbered encounter areas. I mean, where do these lead? What does this mean? What does this entail? We don't know. Chris says, Gary's description of Castle Greyhawk from before people went crazy about believability for dungeon environment sounds way better than the ecologist came up with. Agreed. If nothing else, if you're running a Greyhawk campaign and you're seeking to replicate Castle Greyhawk dungeons, please, for the love of Mike, leave your encyclopedias at home. Read Stardock by Fritz Leiber. Read The Mines of Moria from The Lord of the Rings. Read or watch Journey to the Center of the Earth. The Cube. Maybe give House of Leaves a bit of a read. Ted the Caver. Be gonzo with your otherworldly mega dungeon creation. See, that's what I love. I have to confess, I am guilty of wanting everything to make sense when I got back into AD&D in the late 90s. And even though I got a copy of White Plume Mountain, I discounted it because I thought it was silly. I was like, this is like a carnival. This is like part of Disney gone wild. It's got a nice map. And I didn't even think it had a nice map. The longer I have re-established myself in AD&D, the more I realize that is one of the most beautiful and awesome D&D modules of all time. Because it is nonsensical. Because it is gonzo. And Gary is telling us to do that here in the Underworld and Wilderness Adventure. So we kind of have a key of what this stuff means. We're going to scroll down. I'm sorry, you guys are trying to watch this on screen. Sample map of Underworld level 1. Note stairs down lead through blind passages and return to circular room with wedge-shaped divisions. Unless secret doors located, this area will lead nowhere. This is a simple room labyrinth, generally leading nowhere, but A would be a room containing a monster and treasure. Let us say 4 ogres with 2,000 gold pieces and a magic potion. So we see there, and then there's 2. There's the mazy area. 3. This area simply illustrates the use of slanting passages to help prevent players from accurately mapping a level. Exact deviation from cardinal points is quite difficult for them to ascertain. Well, let's look at 3. What have you got going there? Yeah, slanting passages. Greetings, John David. Good to see you, my friend. Now, 4. 4 sounds particularly nasty. Okay, so 4. No matter which way west players move, they will end up turning into the lair of the monster B. Let us suppose a basilisk. There is a false door in the second passage north. The tunnel to the east contains a trap. C, a slide to a lower level, which is disguised as a set of upstairs. And 5. What is over at 5? Let's see. 5. Little hard to make out because, again, of the scan. But 5 says, the combinations here are really vicious, and unless you're out to get your players, it is not suggested for actual use. So Gary going a little grim tooth on us here. Thank goodness Xylarthen didn't stumble into this, yeah? Passage South D is a slanting corridor which will take them at least 1 level deeper, and if the slope is gentle, even dwarves won't recognize it. Room E is a transporter 2 ways to just about anywhere the referee likes, including the center of the Earth or the Moon. The passage south containing F is a 1-way transporter, and the poor dupes will never realize it unless a very large party, over 50 feet in length, is entering it. This is surefire fits for map makers among participants. So 6. So we have kind of an interesting thing, a 6 with the arrows and all. And Gary says, again, here are a couple of fun items to throw at players. G is a shifting section of wall with a secret die roll to determine which way it will go. 1 equals north, 2 equals east, 3 equals south, 4 equals west, and 5 and 6 it stays put. Such a section will possibly close one of the 4 corridors, possibly blocking access to from the trapdoor located in the room 20-foot square located in the northwest. Point H is a 2-way secret door. On a die roll of add, I think that's probably odd. I think that's probably a scan typo. On a die roll of odd, let us suppose, it opens on a room to the west. Otherwise, it opens on a passage south. The same trick can be used with staircases, having them go up or down at random. And 7, if you're wondering what the cruciform area is, 7, it just gets zanier. This is the nexus for a modular section which will revolve at random periods. Although the passages north, south, etc. will always remain the same, the areas 10 to 20 beyond those will be different at various times. Again, this will frustrate those setting out to map a level. All round rooms must not be nexuses. However, the circular structure in example 1 could, with a bit of alteration, be made into one, as could any room of any shape, providing the modules were properly designed so as to rotate around it. 8. Note the pit X at the 4-way intersection containing a secret door on its south surface. A small tunnel will lead discoverers to the room containing a monster. I. A true troll or two, perhaps. The western portion contains the room of some evil man, complete with 2 secret doors for handy escape. There's also a flight of stairs leading down. Falling into the pit would typically cause damage if a 1 or a 2 were rolled. Otherwise, it would only mean about 1 turn of time to clamber out, providing the character had spikes or associates to pull him out, and providing the pit wasn't one with a snap-shut door and the victim was alone. Kyle. Folks, right here in the Underground and Wilderness Adventures, We have the first published Dungeons and Dragons adventure. It's got monsters. It's got treasures. It's got a map. It's got detailed locations. It's right there, guys. If you want to know, it's right there. Now, the first fully fleshed out campaign-length adventure is Temple of the Frog, as we'll see when we take a look at Blackmoor briefly. So these are all things that Xylarthen might have found in Castle Greyhawk, my Castle Greyhawk, had he elected to continue to explore. But let's read on. And I'm not going to read the entirety of this book to you guys tonight. One, it would take too long, and two, it would be boring. It would just be me just reading stuff at you. In laying out your dungeons, keep in mind that downward and upward mobility is desirable, for players will not find a game enjoyable which confines them too much. On the other hand, unusual areas and rich treasures should be relatively difficult to locate, and access must be limited. The layout of a level will affect the route most often followed by players. Observation of the most frequently used passages and explored rooms will guide the referee in preparation of successive levels, which of course will be progressively more dangerous and difficult. God, I wish I had a six-pack of that. All right, so we have tricks or traps. And this, this runs the gamut. False stairs, up or down, steps which lead to a slanting passage, so the player may actually stay on the same level, descend 2 levels, or ascend 2 levels. Trap steps which lead up a short distance but then go downwards for at least 2 levels, with a return passage blocked by bars or a one-way door. Interlevel teleportation, sinking rooms, illusion, mind control, and Gaius rooms. Sections which dead end so as to trap players being pursued by monsters. Doors which are openable from only one side, which resist opening from one side, or which appear at random levels. Natural passages in caverns which have varying width and direction so that it is virtually impossible to accurately map such areas. Space distortion corridors or stairs which seem longer or shorter than they actually are. Is that all not fantastic? Now, I know we've all seen why Hero Quest is the best game in the world. And I know it is a loving, sweet letter to a game that Bardic Broadcast enjoys. But he does make it funny when he's talking about designing your own adventure with the provided blank map, and he said, it is the prerogative of the keeper of Hero Quest to put a monster in every square. Gary warns us against that. As a general rule, there will be far more uninhabited space on a level than there will be space occupied by monsters, human or otherwise. So don't pack your dungeon full. Okay, we all know the story, the joke, the trope. There's a 10 by 10 room, 10 feet down, with 5 orcs guarding a chest of 100 gold pieces. 5 feet up, there's another door in the hall. You open it up, and there's an adult red dragon. You close it. You go across all, open it, 300 orcs, and what have you. That's a bit much. That's a bit much. Spread those monsters out. But we do have a population method here for the dungeon. Roll the die for every room or space not already allocated. A roll of 1 or 2 indicates that there is some monster there. The monsters can be selected by use of the monster determination and level of monster matrix, which is given later in this booklet. The number of monsters is best determined by the level being considered. The monster table from Volume 2 can be most helpful here. Note that ochre jellies, black puddings, green slime, etc. are generally distributed randomly, usually in passages without treasure. A wise decision. I mean, not too many green slimes are going to be carrying much in the way of pocket change. Well, maybe they do in your campaign. Maybe they don't. Why are you asking me about it? It's your game. Enough of this foolishness. On to other foolishness. So, now this is interesting because you don't see this in other versions of Dungeons & Dragons. Not in Advanced D&D, not in Holmes Basic, not in Moldvay Basic, not in 2nd edition, 3rd, 3.5, Pathfinder, 4th, Essentials. And that is determining treasure in unoccupied rooms and by level. So there's a chance Xylarthen, if he had pressed the attack, as it were, he might have randomly encountered just some loot laying on the ground. 1 level below, which is where he was, 100 silver pieces times 6. So he might have found 600 silver pieces, just boom. Or 10 to 60 gold. A 5% chance each for gems or jewelry. And a 5% chance for magic. So let's say Xylarthen, he doesn't want to quite leave Castle Greyhawk yet. There's that door. He fought the skeletons, he fought the orcs. He's been knocked down a couple of hit points. He's going to chance it. He's going to try the door. Essentially, don't turn your dungeons into a Sandy Peterson Doom map. Or a John Romero anything map. Oh my God. Sigil. John, what did we do to you? John Romero. Okay, so little bit of patting myself on the back. I did ping John Romero on Facebook a few years ago, because I read the book Masters of Doom, which you should too. It is a fascinating look at id Software. The parallels between the creation of the first-person shooter genre and the creation of role-playing game can't be denied. The energy, the vibe, I don't want to go off on too much of a rant about Masters of Doom other than you should read it. Artisan and Gygax and Romero and Carmack. Oh my gosh, just trust me, go read Masters of Doom. But I reached out to John Romero online and I said, hey, I just finished Masters of Doom and the chapters about playing Dungeons and Dragons were the best. I gushed about myself being a D&D fan. And he said, and I quote, "That's great. I love Dungeons and Dragons. My favorite module of all time is Tomb of Horrors." If you guys remember your first experiences playing Doom 2, or even Doom or Sigil, does it not all now make sense? Does it not all gel? Do you not get it? So, Xylarthen decides before he chances. He's going to try that door. Let's see if that room, which I know is not occupied by a monster because I'm the dungeon master and my player also knows because my player is also the dungeon. You know what I'm saying. Xylarthen. Son of a gun. All right. So, pardon me. Xylarthen puts his shoulder into it. Oh, we're going to have a wandering monster check with the racket he's making trying to open that door. Xylarthen is beating the hell out of that door. I'm just going to roll a handful of dice. It's now taken him about 6 or 8 minutes or so to try and beat that door down. I rolled all ones. Xylarthen staggers in the room. We'll keep one of those ones back for the room being unoccupied. Let's see Xylarthen, what he finds. So Xylarthen locates. Dropped a die on the floor. So Xylarthen finds 300 silver pieces, 30 gold pieces. Hey, Mark Corey, good to see you. And a 5% chance of any gems or jewelry. No gems, any jewelry. No jewelry. And finally, any magic items? No magic items. So Xylarthen now has a bag of 300 silver pieces. That's 30 pounds, by the way. And 30 gold pieces. So he has 33 pounds of coins. Now he'll leave Castle Greyhawk. Enough time for the Kobold Commando Battalion to move into position. So let's have a gander. Nope, I rolled a handful of d6s, and Xylarthen did not have a random encounter. He does have to go slowly, though, so we'll give him one more shot to catch him out as he's climbing up that chain back out of the cistern in Castle Greyhawk. Nope. Whatever was making all that furious noise in that room, the monsters either didn't hear it or didn't care to come investigating it, even after the sound of a fight. So you see, the Underworld in original D&D, a little bit different. You can just find treasure lying around. Did sound go out? No, I'm still seeing sound. Are you guys still hearing me? I hope you're still hearing me. Everything appears to be okay at the control center here. Be terrible if I lost audio. John David's not hearing me. Are the rest of you hearing me? Okay. All right. Well, we'll press ahead then. So, Xylarthen has taken a small hoard of treasure, unoccupied, or unguarded rather, in an otherwise unoccupied chamber, destroyed 3 skeletons, slain 3 orcs, and climbs back up. But what about now? Xylarthen is laden with 33 pounds of treasure, and he's all alone in the wilderness. Didn't even have a horse. All right. Now, there was a question of time, the move and the turn in the Underworld. In the Underworld, distances are in feet, so wherever distances are given in inches, convert them to tens of feet. So that's a standard, that's the standard D&D scale, and that's the way it stayed from the get-go. Kobold Commando, yes. Kobold just hanging free in the wind. So movement is in segments of approximately 10 minutes. Thus, it takes 10 minutes to move about 2 moves, 120 feet for a fully armored character. 2 moves constitutes a turn, except in flight or pursuit, where the moves per turn will be doubled and no mapping allowed. Time must be taken a rest, so 1 turn every hour must be spent motionless, and double the rest period must be taken after flight or pursuit. Are you having your players in OD&D rest? Melee is fast and furious. There are 10 rounds of combat per turn. So I was wrong about the time scale being different. I think it's in basic that the time scale is different. Now, once again, we have a slip of the tongue from the good people at TSR, despite the fact that they had to delete Hobbit from the list of playable characters. Secret passages will be located on the roll of a 1 or a 2 on a 6-sided die by men, dwarves, or hobbits. Shame, shame, TSR of 40 years ago, 50-something years ago. Elves will be able to locate them on a roll of 1 to 4. At the referee's option, elves may be allowed the chance to sense any secret door they pass, a 1 or 2 indicating that they become aware that something is there. Generally, doors will not open by turning the handle or by a push. Doors must be forced by strength, a roll of a 1 or a 2 indicating that the door is open. So we are all so far familiar with what's been going on. The oddness of just finding random treasure in rooms, which, by the way, Xylarthen, I kind of gave him a bit of a DM bump there because I forgot. Unguarded treasures should be invisible, hidden behind a secret door, or under the floor, locked and hard to open strong boxes. Well, you know what? When I rolled all those dice for him bashing down the door, I rolled 4 1s. So 1 to open the door and then 1 to find the treasure. So I'm going with that. I'm sticking with it because this is just example play. So it talks pretty much how you understand AD&D is. Now this is interesting. Understand, original Dungeons & Dragons doesn't have a thief. OD&D does not have a thief class. Anyone can be a thief. A thief is somebody that takes something that doesn't belong to them. Doesn't matter whether or not you're wearing plate mail or wizard robes. You know, if you roll a bunch of kobolds and take their belongings, you're thieves. It's kind of like, well, how do you detect traps in OD&D? Anybody can find traps in OD&D. Just keep that in mind. That's how. An admonition about fireballs and lightning bolts. To be hurled in confined spaces, blasting sections of the stone equal to the remainder of their normal shape, it is suggested that the confined space causes these missiles to rebound towards the sender. And this will mean that the sender is struck by his own missile. It may also be compromised, allowing, say, 2 feet of stone wall to be destroyed, allowing 1 foot of stone to be destroyed for every 10 feet the space is short of full distance, and rebounding the missile 1/2 of the distance short. And we have surprise. Now I'm going to say something going forward here. If you've played a lot of first edition AD&D, or even if you just remember it well enough from when it was played, surprise in AD&D is just completely borked in the head. Just use OD&D surprise. A roll of 1 or 2 indicates the party is surprised. Distance is then turned to 30 feet. That's it. No weird chart that's broken in one book but not in another, and let's go have an argument, that requires an 82-page document. No, it's just on a 1 or a 2, the party is surprised. That's it. That's it. That's all. And then we have wandering monster tables. Monster determination and level of monster matrix. So that's, them underground. That's encountering monsters underground. And don't worry, we're going to get to the wilderness. Xylarthen's got to get the hell out of Dodge with his treasure. I haven't forgotten. And we have monsters per level tables. Now, this is where we get the Thule. The Thule, which is a regenerating troll-like undead creature, shows up first in original D&D. The Thule. Although no stats are given for him. The Thule didn't get stats until basic Dungeons & Dragons, I believe. But let us go on. You can encounter other characters. Bandits, spiders, hobgoblins, zombies, lizards, all good wandering monster tables. And I should point out, I wish I had not put my set back on the shelf over there. But all these charts are on the pullout sheets, the quick reference pages in the OD&D set. Now listen to this. Other monsters to consider depending upon the level and surroundings. Giant crabs, giant leeches, giant octopi, crocodiles, giant squids, sea monsters, nixies, mermen, griffins, pterodactyls, rocks, invisible stalkers, cyborgs, robots, androids, shadows, and doppelgangers. Cyborgs, robots, and androids. Oh my. Tell me that's not a dungeon you want to adventure in. Giant. It says giant. I don't know, it doesn't look a thing like James Dean. Number of wandering monster. Avoiding monsters. So this is more about pursuit, how burning oil will stop them. Vincent says, I understood that Gary used to trick his players into going lower into the dungeon than they were prepared for. Yes. Giant cyborgs, giant androids, why not? Monster reactions. The dice score is to be modified by additions and subtractions, such things as bribes, offers, fear, alignment of the parties concerned, etc. And we have the first play example here on page 12. If you're following along in the PDF, we are on page 12. Now, I challenge you guys to read this section on your own and see if you can map out the dungeon with the way the referee, remember, Dungeon Master's not a thing yet, if the way the referee describes it, if you can draw a map. See if you can do that. I always love this line here on page 13. Caller, empty out all the copper pieces and check the trunk for secret drawers or false bottoms, and do the same with the empty one. Also, there seem to be any old boots or cloaks amongst the old clothes in the rubbish pile? Referee, cursing the thoroughness of the caller. It's the adversarial DMing. Some more Doctor Strange art lifted there, but it's labeled as a Nazgul. Another Tolkien slip that they let stand. A Nazgul. Now, the wilderness. This is what we've been champing at the bit. Okay, so on page 14, the so-called wilderness really consists of unexplored lands, cities, and castles, not to mention the area immediately surrounding the castle, ruined or otherwise, which housed the dungeons. The referee must do several things in order to conduct wilderness adventure games. First, he must have a ground-level map of his dungeons, a map of the terrain immediately surrounding this, and finally, a map of the town or village closest to the dungeons where adventurers will be most likely to base themselves. Not to abase themselves, although I guess if they get enough money, they'll abase themselves. Blackmoor is a village of small size, a one-horse town, while Greyhawk is a large city. Both have maps with streets and buildings indicated, and players can have town adventures roaming around the bazaars, inns, taverns, shops, temples, and so on. Venture into the thieves' quarter only at your own risk. The terrain beyond the immediate surroundings of the dungeon area should be unknown to all but the referee. Offhand adventures in the wilderness are made on the outdoor survival playing board, explained below. Exploratory journeys such as expeditions to find land suitable for a castle or in search of some legendary treasure are handled in an entirely different manner. So we're hitting the point where we're going to be using outdoor survival. Vinny asks a question. Demon says a Nazgul looks more like a cowboy ghost rider. If you don't have a dwarf in the party, how does the party determine what dungeon level they're on? You got to be careful, man. You got to be careful in these underworlds. You know? Outdoor survival has a playing board perfect for general adventures. Catch basins are castles, buildings are towns, and the balance of the terrain is as indicated. So there you go. There's the map laid out before you in outdoor survival. So sinkholes are castles, and individual buildings are towns. And the rest of it is as indicated. A river's a river, a lake's a lake, woods are woods, hills are hills, etc., 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 etc. As stated, the ponds indicate castles. I'm sorry, I said sinkholes, but ponds are castles. The inhabitants of these strongholds are determined at random. Occupants of these castles will venture out if a party of adventurers passes nearby. If passing over the castle hex, there is a 50% chance, 1 to 3 on a d6, that they will come out. If 1 hex away, there is on 1 or 2, they'll come out. And if 2 hexes, there's only on a roll of 1. If the party is on the castle hex and hails the castle, the occupants will always come forth if the party is not obviously very strong and warlike. Patriarchs are always lawful, and evil high priests are always chaotic. Note the tendency to equivocate chaos with evil right off the bat. All other castle inhabitants will either be hostile to the adventurers on a 1 to 3 or neutral on a 4 to 6. Determine the occupant of a castle as follows. Well, let's see. Any castles nearby Castle Greyhawk? And I don't have the outdoor survival map, so we don't know yet. But it would be a superhero. Type of guards, retainers in the castle. The number after indicating the type of die used to determine how many. So, our superhero, well, we should roll a d4. We have a 1, so our superhero, oh my gosh, our superhero will be served by D8 champions, D8 myrmidons, 1d4 dragons, 1d4 chimerae, 20 heroes, and 10 trolls. Yikes. Yikes. Oh, when it comes to flying critters, it says, with a like number of heroes riding those creatures. Let's see. Fighting men within castles will demand a jousting match with all passers-by of like class. Otherwise, they will demand a toll from 100 to 600 gold pieces from the party. If a joust takes place, use the rules from chainmail. There we go. We are directly told to go to chainmail. We can't use the normal, the alternate combat system. The occupant of the castle will take the loser's armor if he wins, but if the character wins, the castle owner will host in the party for up to 1 month, resupply them with 2 weeks of rations, and provide heavy war horses if the party so requires. So if Xylarthen were to stumble upon a castle, it's entirely possible he might get called up for a joust, although Xylarthen's on foot, remember that. And he might win hosting for a month, or he might have to give all of his treasure to whoever is in charge of that castle. Magic users from castles will send passers-by after treasure by guess if they are not hostile, with the magic user taking at least half of the treasure so gained, the magic user having first choice of magical items and automatically choosing miscellaneous magic, wand staves, or rings in that order in preference to other items. Otherwise, the magic user will require a magic item from the passerby as toll, and if they have no magical item suitable for the magic user, will require a toll of 1,000 to 4,000 gold pieces. Thank goodness it's not a magic user. Xylarthen would be hosed. Clerics will require a tithe, 10% of all their money and jewels. Really, Xylarthen could do worse than to pass a cleric owned by a castle owned by a cleric. In addition to those men or monsters accompanying castle residents, there will be a number of men aiding in defense. 30 to 180 men will man the walls, one half of whom will be crossbow, armed, light foot, and the balance will be heavy foot. Those castle residents who are accompanied by men or creatures capable of riding or able to make near equal speed will be mounted on horseback, as will their men be mounted. There is an equal chance that there will be others in the castle's party. Fighting man, magic user, or cleric, with a % chance for each. And then they're given levels. Referee's map is a wilderness map unknown to the players. It should be for the territory around the dungeon location. When players venture into this area, they should have a blank hexagon map, and as they move over each hex, the referee will inform them as to what kind of terrain is in that hex. This form of exploring will eventually enable players to know the lay of the land in their immediate area and thus be able to select a site upon which to build their castles. Castle building and its attendant requirements will be covered hereafter. Exploratory adventures are likely to be the most exciting, and their incorporation into the campaign is most desirable. Exploration by foot is at normal speed. Horsed parties will travel at the speed of a draft horse, and exploration by air will be at 1/2 normal flying speed. And again, we have a little slip up here because Balrogs are mentioned. A man on foot can cover up to 3 hexes per day. I guess it depends on the size of your hex, because you're not walking 75 miles in a day. That's just, that's not happening. All right. Parties numbering over 100, including pack or draft animals, will incur a 1 hex penalty. Parties over 1,000 incur a 2 hex penalty. That is a bunch of camp followers. Xylarthen is but 1 man, so he'll incur no penalties. Now again, we have a reference to outdoor survival. All-terrain penalties are as stated in outdoor survival. Mountains and swamps cost 3 movement per hex. Crossing rivers at non-ford hexes cost 3, and woods or deserts cost 2. Tracks through mountainous terrain cost 2 factors per hex moved, and tracks through woods or swamps incur no movement penalty. Hexes are 5 miles. Thank you, Rob. All creatures must rest after 6 days of movement. Rest must be at least 1 full day. Exception: dragons who travel for 3 weeks must sleep 1 full week if their mode of traveling was walking, and they must sleep for 3 full weeks if their mode of travel was flight. Oh, and it's right there. Scale: assume the greatest distance across the hex is around 5 miles. Turn: each move will constitute 1 day. Each day is considered a turn. So there's that time scale weirdness I was talking about earlier. That's where I was remembering it from. And then we have sighting monsters, surprise out of doors, etc. Keenan Powell, Ifrit, which is... the real drawing is okay, but it's not. It doesn't look much better than this. There's a chance of being lost, the chance depending on the type of terrain. A lost party must move in the direction indicated by the die roll, 1 to 6 shown in the outdoor survival rules, and on that board, and may make only 1 direction change from that direction. When exploring, the referee should indicate which direction the party is lost in. And then we have wandering monsters, wilderness wandering monsters. terrain type. Clear woods, river, swamp, mountains, desert, city. Well, Xylarthen just climbed out of the dungeon and he's trying to find his way back to an inn or something like that. Let's see. Does he encounter something? He does not. Not in his first day of travel. He's getting hungry and he wishes he could eat some of that silver and gold he's carrying. Nothing in the second day. And nothing in his third day of travel. Xylarthen has now traveled 15 miles, and since we don't know, other than the terrain is swamp, the rules for getting lost, we press on and assume that Xylarthen is not lost until I can get you guys a copy of Outdoor Survival to show, and we learn from that. But there's all these types of random encounters out of doors. Swimmer types, lycanthropes, dragon types. Basic animals. Optional woods, optional swamps. Oh man. You imagine poor Xylarthen the Second ran up against a Tyrannosaurus Rex. By the way, optional arid plains. Apps, Bants, Thoats, Callets, White Apes, Thoats, Orlux, Sith, Tharks, Darsine, Banths, Tharks. I'm not having a stroke. Those are directly from the Barsoom books by Edgar Rice Burroughs, the John Carter of Mars books. There will be 2 to 12 men with any fighting man, magic user, or cleric encountered in the wilderness. 1st to 4th level of the appropriate class. In addition, there will be other magic items they might have. Why is it important to know that? Hey, maybe Xylarthen the Second's feeling froggy and decides he can take all of them out and take all of their magic loot. Evading in the wilderness. Castle inhabitants will pursue on a roll of 1 to 3 if they're hostile to the party, and only on a roll of 1 if they're basically neutral. Evasion is the same as described below for monsters. Now, I can see poor Xylarthen passes through a hex with a castle. They yell out a challenge for him to joust, and he says, I doesn't have a horse. Well, we don't care. You're going to joust anyway. So Xylarthen just turns laden with treasure and equipment and books. And they're chasing after him, yelling, you come back! You have to joust! Come back! We haven't stabbed at you! Chris says, would love to have Gary DM an adventure on Barsoom. If you have ever heard Ernie talk about the stories of Erac's cousin, I believe it was when he went to Mars that he learned 2-weapon fighting. Or it might have been Erac himself. But either Erac or Erac's cousin found a way to transport from the Castle Greyhawk dungeons to Mars and studied swordsmanship with John Carter there. So he did actually DM some OD&D on Mars. Now, I don't know if that was before or after the very short-lived John Carter of Mars OD&D rule book came out from TSR. It got shut down real quick because I believe at that point in the mid-1970s that Edgar Rice Burroughs had not been dead for more than 30 or 40 years. So yeah, his estate stepped on them and said, stop doing that. How they found out is beyond me. I mean, you know, an obscure little company, even as relatively popular as TSR was getting, and they're like, hey, you random company from Lake Geneva, stop selling our dad's stuff. Whoa, how do you guys even find us? Good night, Rob. Be well. Thank you for stopping by. So you guys kind of get the idea now that original Dungeons and Dragons is not just someone snitched, yeah, probably. It's not just a game of wacky dungeon levels. There's a whole world that will grow. Kyle and I have kind of touched on this, not in original D&D, but just in general. Kyle and I have kind of built encounter areas and hexes, and it's a lot of fun. If you can find those episodes, I should have thought to link to them earlier, but they're in the library. One of the first times I had Kyle on. Warning, the audio on one of them is pretty jank. I know, technical jankiness from my live streams. Chris says, was that the adventure when Eric's cousin became the first character with 2 classes, i.e. dual class, or am I thinking? I don't know, Chris. That's a good question. I honestly don't know. And then we come to construction of castles and strongholds, which is, again, Xylarthen's not quite there yet, but we have some nice illustrations. So if you're wondering what these things look like, and yes, this scan here you can see right there that I highlighted is all kinds of screwed up. It's not that way in the OD&D books. I don't know what they had going on with their scanner there at WotC's offices, but you can kind of get an idea of what towers and keeps and so on might look like. It's not great, but it does kind of lend a little bit of insight. I had to go for a dictionary when I was first reading the Dungeon Master's Guide, and it was a kid reading on castle construction and things like matcholocation and things like that. I was like, oh, okay, help me out, Daniel Webster. Oh, look, specialists are back. Given a formula, the alchemist can duplicate it to make a similar potion at the cost of 1/2 the potion's value. Alchemists may conduct research, but the time and expense are twice that of a magic user, and they may only work on poisons. So maybe don't drink that healing potion straight away. Maybe take it to the alchemist and ask him to duplicate it. Then you have 2. Armorers, assassins. Assassins as NPCs. You know, there's AD&D gets a lot of grief for deleting on the assassin, or AD&D 2nd edition. Gary was thinking about pushing the assassin class out too, and putting it back to being an NPC class, because it started here as an NPC class, although it does get fleshed out, interestingly, as a neutral character in Blackmoor, as we'll see when we kind of go over Blackmoor with this same degree. Animal trainer. Now, you might wonder, well, what animal trainer for what? Hippogriffs, other fantastical wild animals that you're not just going to be able to buy at stables and cities. The sage can only function in an advisory capacity. They are employable only by fighting men. Utmost discretion is required when the referee is acting in this role as a sage. That's it. All the page work the sage gets in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Here it just says, be careful, man. Hired men at arms. And yes, you can hire orcs. That's not half orcs. Those are orcs. Specialist men at arms. Rumors, informations, and legends. Player character support and upkeep is in here. So when Xylarthen, if Xylarthen makes it back to the city of Greyhawk, player characters must pay gold equal to 1% of their experience points for support and upkeep until such time as they build a stronghold. Stay a while and listen. And then we go even further into baronies and so on and etc. that Xylarthen's not even there. Angry Villager rule. This is one that I really wish had gone in AD&D. Anyone who has viewed a horror movie is aware of how dangerous angry villagers are. Whenever the referee finds that some player has committed an unforgivable outrage, this rule can be invoked to harass the offender into line. Within the realm of angry villagers are thieves from the Thieves' Quarter, city watches and militia, etc. Also possible is the insertion of some character like Conan to bring matters into line. Imagine you're hanging out in the city of Greyhawk, and you've taken over the Green Griffin and beaten up the serving wenches and are making the bartender give you free drinks, and you've thrown all the merchants out on the street, and in walks the black-haired, blue-eyed, brawny-thewed barbarian from Samaria. Hey, what do you think you're doing? Leave the innkeeper alone, for God's sake. And proceeds to beat the shit out of you all. I'd do it. Other worlds. There should be no natural laws which are certain. Hi, Ricky Muru. Space could be passable because it is filled with breathable air. On the other hand, stars could be tiny lights only a few hundred miles away. Some areas of land could be gates into other worlds, dimensions, times, or whatever. Mars is given in these rules, but some other fantastic world or setting could be equally as possible. This function is up to the referee, and what he wishes to do with it is necessarily limited by his other campaign work. However, this factor can be gradually added so that no sudden burden will be placed upon the referee. Damien says, Diablo 1 had to start off as someone's Castle Greyhawk game. So, it's funny you should mention that, Damien, because a buddy of mine, Jeremy Roll, who plays in my Monday night game, and I've had him as a guest on the show before. Jeremy actually sent me a video, the developers of Diablo talking about how they created Diablo, like what the genesis of Diablo was. And I will put the link in the Discord when we're done. But there's chainmail land combat, sea combat, written orders for simultaneous movement. I mean, now we're talking about armies and so on, and this really gets into stuff that interlocks with chainmail. But one thing I do want to bring up, critical hit table. That's right, OD&D had critical hits. Or at least it did when it comes to flying creatures and jousting. Naval combat. And it just goes on and on and on and on. And gets back into the wargaminess of it. And I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to wrap up tonight's show right here because I think this is a fine place to do it. There we go. Just kind of bring me into focus here. There are unquestionably areas which have been glossed over. While we deeply regret the necessity, space requires that we put in the essentials only, and the trimming will oftentimes have to be added by the referee and his players. We have attempted to furnish an ample framework, and building should be both easy and fun. In this light, we urge you to refrain from writing for rule interpretations or the like unless you are absolutely at a loss, for everything herein is fantastic and the best way to decide how you would like it to be and then just make it that way. The best way is to decide and then just make it that way. On the other hand, we are not loath to answer your questions, but why have us do more of your imagining for you? Write to us and tell us about your additions, ideas, and what have you. We could always do with a bit of improvement in our own refereeing. Fight on. So that is OD&D in a nutshell. we will revisit this. Like I said, I do want to get a set of the outdoor adventures rules, or outdoor survival rules. We're going to look into chainmail and so on and etc. Those things are all in the offing. We're going to go into the supplements next. We're going to talk about Greyhawk. There will be more Let's Play OD&D. This is not like the end of it tonight. But that, looking over it all without launching into Xylarthen the Second is now a captain general, and we're going to build him a castle, and he's going to have naval battles and great land battles and so on. Without launching into all that, that is the essence of OD&D, and I hope you guys have really enjoyed that. You seem to have liked it. I have lots of people watching the live streams that are really, really, really like that. Tomorrow night, we are going to dip into Supplement 1 Greyhawk and see how Greyhawk extended and expanded OD&D. And are there other options for Xylarthen's character? Are there different things we could do with Xylarthen? Or maybe we'll create a character that conforms strictly to OD&D plus Supplement 1 Greyhawk. So we're going to take a look at that. Basic Fantasy is a fun OD&D retro. A lot of people tell me about different retro clones, and I appreciate them. Not having access to OD&D or AD&D for whatever reasons, those retro clones are fantastic. As easy as it is to lay hands on them now, at the very least, have both of them. At the very least, you should have both of them to see how it is. I mean, you don't get that sample dungeon out of Basic Fantasy. You don't. I'm just saying. But it is good. You're right, Ricky. It is very good. So yeah, we'll wrap up there for the evening. Now I do want to mention this because I don't have this baked into like an outgoing credits, as it were. But I do have several awesome people supporting me now on Patreon, and I thank you. If you would like to support the channel and you didn't see the link in the description, it's right there in the chat. Patreon.com/TheDungeonDelver. And you can support me there. If you don't want it, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But I'm just saying, we got a Patreon. We have 3 tiers now. So you can go check that out if you like. But hey, I'm always going to be here for you guys. Never fear. The OG OD&D is valuable even if you're playing another edition. It absolutely is. Hey, there's people who'll never play AD&D again as long as they live, and they still have their first edition AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide, and they still use them, and they still enjoy the hell out of them. So, not for rules, but for inspiration. So, that's, $5 softcover of Basic Fantasy is $5 off of Amazon. Yep. You get Swords and Wizardry too. It's the same basic thing. But anyway, yeah, that's yeah, the digital Osric is all free too. The digital is anything can potentially be free. Yo ho ho. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't steal from people. But does anybody have any questions tonight? Does anybody have any questions at all before we wrap up this evening? I had a lot of fun talking to you guys and a lot of fun going on with Xylarthen's adventures. And hey, finding that loot. Join up on Patreon now. You can see more of my bad jokes in the comments. What? What are you whatting me, Ricky Maru? Yeah, you can download Ozric for free. But anyway, okay, I'll put the link to Ozric before I go, but let's see. Oh, and I do want to mention something. We've talked before about Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. We've had a lot of good discussion about Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay on this show before. It's right there. But one thing I would like to point out, when it comes to retro clones, I'm okay with most of them. Don't buy Zweihander. Don't waste your money on Zweihander. Don't get Zweihander even if it's free. Spend your money on Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay First Edition. It is now available, a beautiful, crisp, clear, legal scan you can purchase for like $6.99 or $9.99 from DriveThruRPG. All right, I'm actively encouraging you not to get Zweihander. Get Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay First Edition. So, Chris says, you guys are like keeping me going here. Lots of good retro clones out there, but the main focus on them should have been to producing modules for old schoolers, new content that can be easily used by old games. That's right. There are tons of OSR modules. Limited print runs make them hard to get. Yes, that's true. But just FYI, I'm just going to mention this. The $10 tier, which is currently the top tier on the Patreon, every month, you guys get an AD&D adventure, a mini adventure module PDF from yours truly. That's rolling out the door. That's right. So if you want a module, you need a quick one, $10 a month, just saying. Praise Paylor for DriveThruRPG. Just ordered again. Oh, Corian, did you get Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay? Basic produces modules. But now I'm gonna wrap this up. And again, thank you to everyone who supports me on the Patreon. You know what? I know I'm gonna do this. I'm not quite done yet. Did I give you guys? Oh my gosh! Did I get? Yes, I listed the wrong thing. Here. Sorry. That is the link to my Patreon. But no, I want... Let me see if I can figure this out. Is it gonna... Can I do this? Let me see if I can do this, guys. I apologize. I should have gotten like a marquee crawl up. So I want to thank Doomsword Deathmaster, Mobius. Thank you so much for James F. Keck. I appreciate that greatly. John David, Damien X247, all of you guys who've signed up for Patreon, thank you so much. So much. It helps me out. I will absolutely be like the first thing is going to be to get the next step up from free account over on StreamYard, which is $240 annually. So I'm going to do that. So thank you again, guys. Thank you so much. I am really honestly and truly done now. Good night. Love you all. Love your support. Y'all are awesome. I have the best audience in the world. Have a great night. We'll be back tomorrow with more Let's Play OD&D, and we'll be looking at Supplement 1, Greyhawk.